Well, Penny, it's good to be back in the studio with you, the Let Kids Be Kids studio again. To anyone watching, I'm Stephen, and Penny, you've got an update on what happened with the HEEADSSS Assessment video. Some interesting responses, thousands of views, some very concerned parents. Fill me in.
Yeah, so the HEEADSSS Assessment video that we did went out, and it has been watched by over 20,000 people in the last couple of weeks.
At the time of recording?
At the time of recording. And really what we asked for in the video was for people to contact us if they had concerns or if they'd had experiences either as a parent or perhaps in the medical industry or something around it. So it was great because we got some people contact us. They were horrified. And so what we wanted to do today is actually read out what some of the people that were contacting us had said, because it all just helps more people to feel not alone and like they are seeing what they're seeing. So we've got some parent comments and we've got some comments from the medical industry as well. And really it's about, you know, a lot of us haven't had a voice for a while, and that comes through in some of the stories is people have felt that something's off for a while in a lot of areas, but we're just talking particularly around surveying children and excluding the parents from it and how that's been done in an underhanded way. And it's been interesting because we've been looking at this for a year, but it was kind of a big step to put the report out and put the video out, and we've had everything confirmed by the people that have contacted us. We haven't had anyone say it's not true.
Yeah.
Dame Sue Bagshaw hasn't contacted us or anything like that. That's
true. I've had people contact me who are just friends saying, yeah, this is horrendous, and that's what was going on for my kid years ago.
Yes.
It's good to have it finally exposed. So what's the first one we're going to?
So we're going to look at some parent stories, and I'm actually going to read them out, and they've all given me permission to share. So I'm pretty much going to read them word for word. And really, if you're listening to this, watching this, and this is your story too, please reach out to us. Or if you want to, because it's really important to know what is truly going on.
What's the best way, by the way, just if this is the first part of the video they're getting on and they've got to come back, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yep, go to our website, which is letkidsbekids.nz, and we've got a contact form on there. But we're also across social media, so you can contact us on whatever your preferred channel is. Yeah,
and it might be cheeky to say it now, but you may as well hit like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And we'll mention this again at the end, but you may as well stay on top of things whilst you're watching this video if these topics are important to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so I say that we create tools and your job is to share it if you like what you're saying, because in that way people can all help each other. We've got to get the word out. Obviously mainstream media doesn't talk about this sort of stuff, so we've got to really help each other.
Yeah, this is really missed information.
It's really missed information.
That's true.
Right, so I'll crack into the first story. So daughter is 13 years old. She's year 9 and she did want me to mention the name of the school, so it's Whangarei Girls High.
Okay.
Whangarei Girls High School. And this was only recently, so it was in the last month. The child was asked to go to the student support centre. It was a female doctor and a nurse who asked if she knew why she was called in. She did not know either of them, and she had no support person. So they called her in, not preempted.
To be with these two strangers.
She said no, she didn't know. And they proceeded to say that it was a year 9 confidential survey.
She said no, she didn't know to what?
And she said no, she didn't know why she was being called in.
Well, that's a kid with presence of mind.
Yeah.
Good for her.
They asked her if she knew why she was being called in, and she said no, she didn't know.
Yeah.
So they proceeded to say this is a year 9 confidential survey that all students were to participate in. They mentioned mum and dad will not be told about any of it or her answers. So they do that under the premise of under privacy. You can tell us whatever you want because mum and dad are never going to know.
Shocking.
Right. So then they proceeded to ask her many invasive questions, which we now know is the HEEADSSS psychosocial assessment, which the mother realised after she watched our video. She recognised the questions that I read out. Questions asked included, has she menstruated yet? Is she sexually active? Does she have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Does she use vapes, drugs, alcohol? Has she ever been touched inappropriately? What's her home life like? What does her family argue about? Who does she trust in her family? Has she ever been abused? What does she eat? Bearing in mind that her daughter has not yet menstruated, let alone had sex. So again, this is very much the same questions. And she's
how old again?
13.
13, and she's being asked this.
And just go back to the fact that it was two people, medical professionals that she didn't know. So And
Alone
I really
in a room.
recommend that everybody go back and listen to and watch our first video, because we play some stuff with the Sue Bagshaw podcast of how she teaches us, and she's saying you're building a rapport with them, and so she's kind of getting away with it with that. But what we're finding is that the students going in sight unseen with these people asking invasive questions. So it goes on to say, our daughter messaged me immediately after leaving the meeting feeling deeply uncomfortable. She did not feel that she had a choice about answering the questions and was highly embarrassed at how personal they were. I thought she may have been asking the questions as she has had a lot of time off school this year. So I want to include that in this story, because the mother was thinking, oh, the daughter's been absent a while, so perhaps they're having a check-in on her. And so, but they find out afterwards that that wasn't why they were asking the questions.
Right. So mum had assumed because she'd been absent for a few days.
Yeah.
Or
throughout the
many
year.
days.
Yeah.
Okay.
That maybe it's cool that the nurse actually did check in on her in a normal sense.
Right.
But it says, however, on digging deeper, soon learned that this was not the case at all. Daughter confirmed that her friends were also subjected to this, and they were asked slightly different questions. We were deeply concerned and quite disgusted that our children are being exposed to this without parental consent. And she said their take on consent seems highly dubious, and for whom this information is recorded with and why. And then she said, because I asked her if she had actually had the option to opt her daughter out.
Right.
And she said, I received no letter from Te Whatu Ora or the school or an email. And when I went back over her school enrolment form that she signed her daughter into the school with, Whangarei Girls High, this is a statement that could be the only statement that I could find to indicate consent for the survey. So the statement says, we agree that any information regarding our students' educational progress and development may be sought by a member of the staff verbally or in writing. I also agree that information relating to my students' well-being and education may be shared in confidence, verbally or in writing, by the school for legal, financial, educational, health and safety or employment reasons.
So that's where they got her.
That's where she can figure out that they got her, because she wasn't given the option to opt out. And like we said on the previous interview, and we've said in other interviews before, is that we've found that the way that schools are getting around what we would consider sneaky behaviour is they go back to the enrolment form and say, well, you signed off on it. So we say, read the fine print, and we're going to show you some examples later.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was story one. So that's an example of a parent who doesn't know until after the fact, and the child is traumatised. There was a little bit more to that story. Apparently there was a syringe on the desk, and the girl was worried that she was going to get force vaccinated, so she was quite frightened, and she didn't have a rapport with these people.
For God knows what, though, right? That's the thing, because
exactly.
at that age, with a pandemic over,
Yeah.
It could be for someone who's mad about HPV or something.
Yeah. You know, you've got teenagers who I believe what's coming through in social media and through school is this disassociation from trusting their parents. So unless you've already got a good relationship with your kids, it's only going to get harder. So it really comes back to, you know, help your kids to open up to you, because you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And kids are being told that mum and dad don't know much. So the people that I know that are getting through this okay with their kids generally have both parents in the home and are generally solid on things together. It's tougher for a single parent because sometimes you've got the other parent that isn't in agreement with you on this stuff, or you're parenting differently. But, you know, it's so important to be close about what's going on with kids. So the second story was a mum who contacted us after watching the video, and she actually had received a letter from the school nurse, and we'll bring that up if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So this school actually did send a letter out earlier in the year, and we want to show this because you might receive a letter like this, or have received, and actually coming up to the end of the school year, you might receive one. If you've got an incoming year 9 next year, they might receive it in January, because that's how we first found out about it. So if we just scroll down, so we've redacted out which school it is, but they're a registered nurse employed by a health agency, and they're based at the school. So if we go down to the highlighted bit, what it says is, part of my role is to provide wellness assessments. The purpose of the health and wellness assessment is to ensure that students have no barriers to their learning. So that sounds really innocuous. If I was a parent reading that, I would think, well, yeah, I've got a child that's having a little bit of learning struggles, and he's coming from primary school to college, and so I actually want them to assess him because I need to know whether he's going to get extra reading support. I would read it like that as a parent.
That's fair enough. It's a fair enough assumption if you don't have conspiratorial thinking.
Yeah, but what we've exposed with the HEEADSSS report that we did was that they talk it down to the parent, and they say here, we're providing a wellness assessment, making sure they have no barriers to learning. And then it says there the aim is to identify any health or social concerns. So it's not actually about their learning, it's about their health and social concerns. So you've got to really unpack what's in here. And then it says, link them to appropriate health or social support services, which now we know that we can't trust them all. That's concerning. So it doesn't say we're going to identify if there's any concerns and come to you first as a parent. It's saying we're going to go to services. And then it says details from the assessment will be recorded in a confidential database. So it's
that's really important too, because that means parents are never told.
Never told. And under the Privacy Act, the students are always told that, no, whatever you're saying here isn't going to go any further. And I've experienced this myself. And so the only way that what a child is saying in the counselling room is going to get across the parent is basically if the child's life is in danger. And, you know, in some situations this would be appropriate if the child is in distress at home, being abused at home. But what we're really saying is that they're kind of weaponising the Privacy Act to say, hey, you can trust us over here in the counselling office or in these little groups that we set up, but we won't tell mum. And so that's really destroying the trust between the mother, the parent and the child. So this mother, she actually had her alarm bells go off about this letter, and so she did actually opt her child out. So we'll have a look at how she opted out, because we help a lot of parents with this, and if parents are watching, it's this simple. So this mum, she just sent an email back to them, and by the way, when the nurse had sent the letter, they said there was a deadline by which they needed to have this done. And that's fair enough from an admin point of view. So basically the mum just said, hi, thanks for the email. Can my child please be taken off anything with seeing a nurse? Basically, no, I don't want them to see the nurse. Because they can just have a conversation that you don't know.
Right.
We will sort it if required on our end, which is fair enough. Because,
I think that's reasonably expressed.
We used to just go to the doctor if the kids were sick and the kids would be off school. But now that nurses are in school, this is where it's happening.
Right.
And then it says, please also note that there will be no vaccinations or anything for my child because we will sort it on our end. And that's just a really nice, simple way. They're not explaining why. You don't have to tell them why. Just opt out. So we'll put
really straightforward.
Yeah, we'll put a template up on our website. We'll have a template up on our website, but this is just an example of a parent who did do that. And so they came back and sent this so that we could see that it was happening there. And she just said when we saw the video, we were just really glad that we saw it and felt wrong about it at the time and did opt her out.
This is a great example of a parent helping others by sharing information. And again, like you said at the beginning, go to Let Kids Be Kids.
Yeah.
Or make a comment on one of our platforms, and you can help people in that way too, and reach out to us.
Yeah, and we also have regional groups getting set up around the country. So what we're trying to do is where there's a family in an area is hook them in with other families in that area or at that school if we can, because a lot of feedback that we get is people feel really alone and they feel like they're the only one, and often schools will say, well, no one else is complaining about it, so then they're like, well, surely I'm not the only parent at my school. But how do you find each other? Because often at high school too, you're not at the school gate like you were at primary school. You might only see them at sport, and kids are often on the bus. So it's actually harder to connect with families at high school. But with Let Kids Be Kids on our Facebook page, we've got regional groups, and people can join up there and try and help each other. It's about helping each other too.
True.
So, so that's the third story was another mum who contacted, and by the way, dads are allowed to contact us as well.
Of course.
Mums seem to have more words.
Be a rad dad. Get in contact.
Dad. Yeah. We do have some amazing dads in our network. So anyway, but they just happen to be mums. So a mum contacted us and she shares the story. Now, this is an important one because it was from 18 years ago.
Okay. That's some time.
Yeah, so everyone who's got kids in school now, this is before their time. So this hasn't just happened. It's been happening for a while. So I'll read this one out because it's a bit different. Her 11-year-old son, 18 years ago, was undergoing a repeat educational psychology assessment for support at school because he has dyslexia. His prior assessment was with a lovely older female educational psychologist, so they were comfortable with it. She was unavailable when the repeat assessment was due, and the parents were offered by the school and agreed to go to an appointment at Massey University Psychology Department in Auckland, because their usual one wasn't available.
Right.
So she said, up until then, assessments were respectful and mindful of the reason that she and her son was there, meaning ring fencing about dyslexia and not breaching outside of that. This assessment was different. Our son was very upset after the second session because he had been asked if he had a girlfriend and whether he was in a sexual relationship. Remember, he was 11 and he was there for dyslexia.
And he was asked if he was in a sexual relationship.
Correct. So she goes on to say, I was horrified when he told me, and now I wonder what other intrusive questions he had been asked about his family, etc. Because you don't know, right?
No, you don't.
And the kid will only pick probably the worst one to tell you.
And you won't find out.
You won't find out unless the child says it to you and they're not told that that's what they're meant to be doing. So she said, completely inappropriate and bizarre for an educational assessment and not what we had asked the psychologist to do. Remembering this kid does not have a psychological problem, has dyslexia. When I discussed it with the psychologist soon after, he was defensive and adamant that many children with learning difficulties have other issues. I pointed out that many don't, as they have different wired brains and different ways of approaching learning. So a learning challenge like dyslexia is not a disability. So anyway, I took my complaint to the head of the department but didn't ever receive a satisfactory response. To top it off, this man assessed our son to have exceptionally low IQ scores across the board, which we knew was enormously incorrect and contradicted his obvious intelligence, original assessment and subsequent assessments. I can only assume that our son did not feel comfortable with this person, and initially I had assumed it was because of the assessment itself, but in hindsight I suspect it was largely due to the intrusive and inappropriate questions he was asked. Instead of this man building trust, it built distance and mistrust with our son. I refused to pay the hundreds of dollars they attempted to charge for this assessment and apologised profusely to our son for the completely inappropriate experience at the age of 11. I also discussed our experience with the teacher at the school, and they didn't refer any further children to this group of psychologists. I wanted to share this with you, as I suspect it has been brewing in the background for quite some time.
Oh, that's very good of that person to share that. Very helpful. Interesting. So what sort of person was doing the assessment there? Was it a psychologist, a proper psychologist?
Yeah, the one that she was concerned about, they'd gone along to Massey University Psychology Department for it. So it wasn't the woman.
No, because that original lady was really great.
Yeah,
right?
So they were psychologists. They were qualified psychologists.
But what about the initial review of him having a higher IQ?
Yeah.
Was that done by the lady?
That would have been done prior, yeah. And then she said also subsequent. So it was just this blip in the middle of his journey through this where this guy had done it. But it would have affected him greatly because an 11-year-old going in to talk about dyslexia isn't going to want to be talking about with a man that he doesn't know his sexual stuff.
No, not only that, but like all of this stuff is really damaging.
Mm-hmm.
But so is being told you have a low IQ.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's not told to you directly, but told to your parents, and then that affects you and that damages you because they treat you differently. Yeah. I mean, how dare anyone make an assessment of your intelligence? It sounded to me, or looks to me, or at least I can imagine, this is a psychologist that's decided not to like your kid. Yeah, they're not impartial. They're just kind of going, "I'll show you," you know. And
it's scary how much power we give them as parents. And I mean, I've raised my children, and I've been involved in some of this stuff with both of my children, with like reading disabilities and mental health stuff. And as a parent who's struggling and you want to help your child, there's only one place offered, and that's this kind of support. And when it breaks you, it breaks you. I know it. I know a lot of people for whom it is. And you're just going, well, who do I go to for help? Who do I go to for help if the people that I've gone to for help are actually making this worse? And I'm not saying that they all do, because some have a great outcome, but a lot don't. And so where do you go? And it's really interesting that even this mum, 18 years ago, and it's really affected her, obviously, for her to even have watched the video and to the point where she's reached out, because we all know that it's happening. When we're in the system, when you're a parent who's been in the system, you've sat in the waiting rooms, you've talked to the other parents, and you know that there's something really broken. We just want to bring this out into the open so that we can have the conversation, because it's really tough for parents. Yeah, social media probably doesn't help because everybody puts their view of their perfect family out there. So when you really are struggling as a parent with stuff, you're looking at everyone else who looks like they've got a perfect family and aren't having all those issues. So if you've got that as well, on top of the fact that when you go to these agencies, you know, they're not working for the family in a lot of situations.
It's shocking that this is happening and people be up in arms about it, but the people doing it are going, you signed off on it.
Well, not only that, and we talked about it in the first video, but I want to believe that, and I actually talked about it when I was on Reality Check Radio with Paul Brennan, because he said at the end of the interview, he said, you know, what do you think is really behind this? And I said, well, if you look at it close up, these medical professionals, these psychologists, these doctors, these counsellors that are using this stuff, they've literally gone and trained because they obviously care about kids if they're in paediatrics or teaching. And they're being told by the professionals, by the people at university, that this is how you do it. So they believe that. So in their little world, they might believe that they're doing the right thing, not realising the train wreck that is being left in the wake. So in a granular level, I'm not really about pointing the finger at any one particular psychologist or doctor. The system has had information in that really have they got good evidence that this stuff's helping our children. So on a big level, you know, through the universities, who's in charge? Who's getting to influence this stuff? Who's putting these programs through?
Well, even some of the doctors know that this is a terrible approach. There's a comment from someone on one of the Let Kids Be Kids forums who was a doctor who talked about this. Yeah,
so moving on from, those are some parent examples, and we've had a lot more anecdotal comments as well, so those are just three that I wanted to share. So there was a comment from a GP on one of our forums who appears to be currently practicing. So what they said was, I'm a GP and I hate the didactic brainwashing in the guise of educational lectures for gender identity issues here in New Zealand. I do use the HEEADSSS assessment in a targeted manner for high-risk kids, as you have mentioned. So this is what we talked about in the first video, without most of the additional letters in the heads, which we also talked about in the first video, that Sue Bagshaw added in a few extra letters. So what this doctor is saying is that they're using it in the manner that he or she was originally trained in, which is to use it with targeted high-risk kids and to keep the acronyms without the recent stuff in, and that was about
as opposed to just carte blanche on all the kids.
Yeah, so targeted, which is what I would
consider that acceptable?
As a parent, I would. Right now, I probably wouldn't, but up until recent times, I would have considered that acceptable, because if you have a child who is presenting with something and you do take them along to a professional, you would assume that they have a system by which to ask them those questions.
You'd also assume that it would be okay using common sense, that if you see a kid's having a rough time, you go, all right, look, this is a kid that maybe just check that everything's okay. Yeah. And from that intention, this is all cool. But it's really amazing how things from a good intention get distorted, and now it's being used on all the kids.
Yeah.
God knows why.
And we bring it up in the original HEEADSSS assessment and with the letter it was received, because they said, we're getting lots of government funding now, so we're going to roll it out. So that's when you kind of go, interesting. They're doing it from money rather than in a needs basis and actually targeting these high-risk kids. So anyway, this GP says that they use it in a targeted manner. They don't use the extra letters. I would say this GP sounds like they've got their head screwed on, and they wouldn't say, they're coming in for an inhaler, so I'm going to ask them what gender they are. You know, they probably would understand how you don't take it out of context, but it's given you some examples of questions that you could use if you were on a particular tangent. So
when Sue Bagshaw says, well, while you're here, because she said that in that video, right? While you're here, let me ask you about your gender. While you're here about your asthma inhaler, let's discuss how often you've had sex as an 11-year-old or whatever that stuff is. This doctor would just be using it appropriately and not making it an abuse of his or her power. Yeah, that's right. And I did hear it from another GP as well that they do use it, but I didn't know in what context. So this is where, you know, we've talked about this as far as it being in school, but if you have a concern about this, you have the right as a parent to ask everybody that's part of your child's life. Yeah. What was how did that sentence go where it used the word didactic? Yeah, so he said he hates, or he or she, sorry, I don't know what sex this GP is, but hate the didactic brainwashing in the guise of educational lectures for gender identity issues here in New Zealand. I had to look up the word didactic, I have to admit, Ben. and it was when someone's teaching something to you, teaching a moral lesson, but they're usually looking down on you. What's the word? Patronizing.
Yeah.
And trying to teach you what to think. Teach you what to think and patronize you in the process. Great use of the word didactic.
Well, it's interesting too when you say teach you what to think, because that's exactly what Sue Bagshaw was saying. They're
train you.
They're training the young people how to answer the questions that they want them to answer, which is very, very frightening. What the last part of what this doctor said was, and of course, so they said about using the HEEADSSS in a targeted manner for high-risk kids, and then they said, and of course, all with the parents' proper consent, not covertly. And then they said this woke teaching must end so that we can actually end up helping kids. Their cry is they want to help the kids, so they're very much into parental consent. So there are some good doctors out there.
It's great to see a doctor saying that this is woke, because they're seeing it in their own field, and it must be disappointing. This is not why they got into the field of medicine at all.
No, and so maybe if you're a parent and you're concerned and you go and talk to your GP and they're telling you that you're barking up the wrong tree, I would maybe go look for another GP and find someone like this GP who will talk your page, you know.
Did you know, actually, I've come to learn, and I didn't know this until recently, that with telehealth, you can actually pick a different GP from anywhere in the country and just see them on Zoom. And if you need a test done, they'll prescribe the test at your local wherever to go get it done, blood test or whatever.
Okay.
You know, and maybe you need to do blood pressure or something, and you get your own device from the Chemist Warehouse to do it, and you just hand that information over to them and they become your new doctor, and you can interview your doctor, the one you want, not just the one that's in your little town, suburb, whatever.
That's really good for people that are listening, particularly if they are in the regions, because there's a lack of doctors out there. So
I won't say the names of them, but I will say that if you talk to your local pharmacists and say, who are the telehealth options, they'll tell you a list of people from whom prescriptions come into their pharmacy from all around the country that aren't necessarily in that suburb or town.
Wow.
And so you can find it from them and then get advice from who's a good telehealth person, because I'm sick of my local.
That's really good. I will also do a shout out to NZSSS on here,
Sure.
New Zealand Doctors Speaking Up with Science, because they have a website called the Health Helpline, and they have doctors available on that. So if for people that aren't trusting the system anymore, there is actually, again, online, and you can go and visit them if you're in the area, but there's always at least one doctor on every day. So there are other options, and
that's the best first port of call. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so it's Health Helpline. So the other one that I wanted to share was a former psych nurse. So there's a little bit here, but I'm going to read it out. It's really important. She says, I have always been worried about what has been going on in schools when they announce that they want mental health nurses in all schools too. That was some time ago in the lead up to 2020. And she then observed that the Mental Health Act changed after the first lockdown. She also mentioned that a whole lot of the mental health nurses trotted off to a conference and came back with all this new information. So remembering the timing of that.
Was that just after the pandemic? They trotted off to a conference?
Just after the lockdown. So she said that she was trying to find a copy of it. She couldn't find it to compare, but she said she remembers that it allowed for people to be sectioned more easily due to social distancing rules.
That's really interesting, right? The word sectioned is a big, scary word. If you section someone, you're putting them in an asylum. You restrain them, you lock them up. Under Section 8 of the Health
And we've
Act
had stories about that, just going a bit off topic. We've had stories about people being sectioned because they disagree with things. So, and we know that they're heavy-handed with that overseas. So I'm not a mental health expert, so I think if people are interested in this, they'd need to go to the Mental Health Act and contact through NZSSS and others and to really get an understanding of what the risk is here. So what she says is, I also noticed how when dealing with clients and their counsellors, that the counsellors were working in a way to lead clients with mental health issues in an ideologic way, like we now know is obvious with gender ideation. In the last few years of work, I noticed how easy it was for the psychiatrist to just keep prescribing puberty blockers to clients transitioning. I also argued with psychiatrists when they kept wanting to renew medical certificates for benefits as opposed to enabling clients to empower themselves to getting back into work, as we had all the resources to help them with this. But no, the psychiatrists were all about keeping them on medical certificates to keep them under the system. Surprise. This talk that Penny and Stephen did was great, as it exposes exactly what has been going on for some time, and those of us trying to speak up about it have been silenced. The area that she is in, which actually I will say, because it's the same as the Whangarei Girls High School, so it's Whangarei. And they didn't know each other, by the way. This is just information that came in. I don't think they knew each other. My area has a bit of an underbelly as far as manipulating youth with counsellors and child and welfare, Orangata Mariki involved. It's hard to prove, but very real, and lots of people have experienced not so great things dealing with them. I feel strongly about these issues in our schools being infiltrated to turn our children against parents. There we go again. They are doing it very subliminally and with great deceit, and it has been done before in history, and it's a political playbook, and it's not happening by accident. We talk about that in our roadshow, in part one of the roadshow. This is a very sinister takeover indeed, and all about data collection from the children who child welfare will then be able to take away from their parents given the information on these assessments. All parents need to teach their children to be aware and critical thinking so as not to take part in any of the assessments at school that asks for personal questions about themselves. So that is the advice from a psych nurse.
Right, so when you're teaching stranger danger to your children, the new strangers are the teachers and the counsellors.
Unfortunately.
The new danger.
Potentially.
Danger,
and it's a tough one, right? Because
danger
we also know that
2.0 from a psych nurse herself.
Yeah, we also know that there are great teachers in there. We also definitely know that there are great teachers in there who are aware that they're working in a tough system and they're trying to protect the children.
Yeah, that's really sad.
So it's not about all of them. It's about really get to know the teachers. Ask them lots of questions. You'll soon find out if they're on the woke side or if they're going, yeah, I'm really doing the best that I can here.
Well, maybe some teachers can anonymously reach out on one of our forums, put some comments in and say, here's how you tell the good ones from the bad ones.
Yeah.
You know, and or reach out to you personally and ask for anonymity.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Again, just like the doctors for whom this was not why they got into this field, for the good teachers, this also isn't why they got into this field. They don't want to be assisting with the agenda, the message.
And when it comes to the gender stuff particularly, it's just another way to create confusion and division. It's got nothing to do with the gender agenda. It's got nothing to do with education. Like, I feel for teachers that have gone into this career thinking I'm going to be helping to, you know, empower young people and teach them because I love teaching them about history or music or art.
Yeah, weren't they supposed to be giving kids strength, confidence, and the ability to make their way in the world and be useful citizens and capable of fending for their own future families? Isn't that what it's about?
I think that's what it's meant to be about.
That's
I mean,
why
I
we're
know
going
that's
to
what
schools,
it's meant to be about.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when they keep focusing on labelling and division and minority stuff and also victim status.
Oh, victim status, yeah.
You know, and I mean, obviously I talk about this stuff all the time, but we're creating a generation of narcissists and activists with this stuff. So it takes a very strong family to be able to beat that away from the door of their homes.
Yeah.
Because it's not only coming through school, it's coming through social media, it's coming through online and everything. So, yeah. I just want to move on to enrolment forms because back at the start, and we mention it and it's in the HEEADSSS assessment, is that the doorway seems to come for passing your children's contact details onto the health system through enrolments. So the first one we're going to look at is actually Whangarei Boys School, and it's just picked. So it's just picked randomly.
Randomly, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So firstly, I just want to show you, remembering, and the reason I share this one is it's a boys' school.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just go down to student details there, you'll see gender, and if you click that drop down, remembering this is a boys' school,
legal names, last name, etc., birth, and then gender. Okay.
And oh my goodness. They've got female, gender diverse, transgender male, transgender female, gender diverse, not elsewhere classified. This is at a boys' school.
At a boys' school?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So obviously this is a this is a portal for an enrolment form that a lot of schools are using, so it would just be standardised. But really, this is a boys' school. So are they saying that if you're not a boy, you can go to that school? I mean, and also most of the children that are being enrolled here, not all of them, but most of them will be 12, 13 years old. Are they already going to know?
My God.
I know.
I mean, here's where like you're making some really great points, okay? And I'm just going, yeah, no, this is crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. Mm. But it says female. Mm-hmm. At a boys' school. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's crazy enough with the other stuff and there's all of the gender agenda going on. But this is a boys' school and it's got female. Okay, sorry, I'll just pull myself together.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad that it's even got that, but that's assuming that the truth, which is that there are only two sexes, but there's 4 other options there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
this
no,
is,
I was actually,
children.
weirdly enough, I was actually prepared for those 4 other options. I was like, yeah, no, after the L, the G, the B, and then the T and the plus and the Q and the rest, I'm prepared for that. But I just wasn't prepared for just female at a boys' school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the crazy feedback that we get quite a lot is single-sex schools are, when they're being questioned on it, they're like, oh no, we have to accept everybody. It's like, hang on. There's one defining thing about the school, and that is that my child will be there with other children of the same sex. So,
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's a bit of a warning bell. So if we just scroll down to the Privacy Act, which will be down at the bottom.
Okay. Blanket consent.
Yeah, so they have a blanket consent form, and this isn't the main part of what we're going to talk about, but read the fine print of all of that, because some of them say, actually, can you just go back up?
Yeah, sure.
So just there, in the box,
And the grey
under
box.
medical, and I'm just going to raise this as a side thing,
Okay.
under medical and support, and this is under the blanket consent. Can you see, just below where you highlighted,
Okay.
scroll down, it says, I agree to my child receiving any emergency medical, dental or surgical treatment, including anaesthetic or blood transfusion, as considered by the medical authorities present. So that's saying that if you say you agree to that, if your kid's on camp, they could get a blood transfusion without you knowing.
On camp.
And I've seen that on all the EOTC forms that I've looked at. So that's just a side thing.
Right.
So then keep going down, actually, because it's just still about EOTC, which is for parents that don't have kids in school yet. That's education outside the classroom.
Right. Media
Okay, it's the
permission.
privacy one there.
Okay, this one. Sorry, gotcha. Here we go.
Yep, so it says, I give my permission for the principal or their nominee, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, the second sentence says, contact details may also be passed on to the Ministry of Education and other government ministries. So that sounds really light, but any government ministries, so that could be Internal Affairs, that could be the Ministry of Health, which is what we're focusing on here, is that's how they get this information to the school nurse who works in the school but is contracted to the local health organisation.
Okay, and the danger there is?
That they can come across these sorts of surveys and assessments and you might not know. You might not have another option to opt them out.
Well, in fact, the Ministry of Health has sort of, in one way or another, put those assessments there.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not the ministry exactly, but they've got government funding,
Yeah.
so it's all part of the same octopus.
Yeah, and we got the evidence of that because when we had the letter that triggered the HEEADSSS analysis that we did, we put an Official Information Act request into the school and said, how is it that you think that you have the legal jurisdiction to do this? And they came back with a picture of the parent's signature on the enrolment form.
Gotcha.
So we know that
You
that's how
signed
they've
off on
done it.
this.
Yeah, so we've got the evidence to know. So what we're really doing is saying, parents, go and have a look at your enrolment forms. Now, at this time of the year, most parents have already done them for next year, and that's why we pointed out right at the beginning that you can update your details at any time. And so if you are worried about this, by all means, go and tell the school, email them. And going back to that lady who did do that, the second story, the one thing that she didn't do was she didn't say, can you please provide me with evidence that you have received and noted my request? So I would add that in as well, so that you then have a trail of the school saying, we've got that, we're definitely not going to put them through any surveys.
That's an important addition.
Yeah.
Can you confirm that you've received and actioned?
Yeah,
No.
yeah, well, yeah.
Give me
received.
notification you've received this and actioned it.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
actually go to the point of asking them, and we'll have this template available. What are all the surveys that are on offer at my school? Because there's other ones, like there's schools that are doing World Economic Forum surveys, and then when the census was out the other year, they did a kids census and make it all fun, get the kids to do it.
Can you even ask what are the surveys that are on offer if you've signed that you don't have to be told what are the surveys that are on offer?
Well, I would say, of course you can ask because you're the child's parent. Ask away.
But can you expect them to be honest if you've signed off that they don't have to be honest?
You haven't signed off that they don't have to be honest. You've given full permission for them to do anything under the banner of Ministry of Education and other government ministries. So you haven't done, it's tacit agreement.
Okay.
You haven't looked deeply enough. So they'll go, well, you said yes. And you're like, oh, but I didn't realise you were going to do that. So the key thing is realise what they're going to do because we're all talking about it now.
True.
And then you go in informed and go, I want to know that I want to know what all the names of the surveys are. And we talk about it in the first one as well, but a lot of schools are going digital now. So they're doing the surveys as an online survey. And there's one called Good Space Schools. And that is utilising the HEEADSSS assessment, and it's an online survey. Oh, in health class today, everyone's going to do an online survey.
I can't help but wonder if Good Space has anything to do with that one internationally or in Australia, Headspace, that's been so damaging.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. It's odd.
Odd naming similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to look at another enrolment form, so let's go to the next one, because they're not all the
Sure.
same, right? Yeah, the next tab.
That one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is another enrolment form that comes in a downloadable PDF, and we've redacted the school.
Okay, that's what that big black block is, the school's name.
Yeah, we're keeping some schools private. But so what you'll see here is a tick box of all, the IT agreement, education outside the classroom. But then the two that we've highlighted there to note is we are aware that there are medical and dental practitioners available to students at the school. And so that
sounds reasonable.
It sounds reasonable.
Lump dental in with it. Everyone's fine with that usually.
Yeah, and we'll go down to the bottom part where we look at the agencies that they're going to send the information to. So back to what we were saying.
Right.
So that, like you say, if you are trusting, you're like, yeah, that's fine. But what people aren't realising is they're going to automatically have access to your children's data, and you might not even know. And then the second one there is we are aware that student support and guidance services at the school may include facilitation of small groups. Now, at this school, I know that they're running a rainbow groups and stuff, and parents had no idea that they were happening. So, again, unfortunately, we're having to be a little suspicious. But if you've ticked that box, you've basically given them the right, I understand, for them to invite your kids to whatever group they want. And if the kids don't want to tell the parents, they don't get to tell the parents.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's important to read the fine print of the enrolment forms.
So what examples of that? That's everything from drag queen story hour to rainbow group to learning to be a 13-year-old who's transing.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't. I don't know many drag queens that come into school space, so it might not be that.
Right, sorry to conflate. That was a kindergarten level thing, wasn't it?
That was usually at the public libraries,
At the
so the
public
parent
library.
has to come in
Right.
to that. But yeah, a lot of them have rainbow clubs. And groups like that, and they lump it in with all the other groups, the chess club and all of that, and that's just one of them. But
I love how they lump it in with the chess club and the book club and
yeah,
yeah.
And some people might think that's fine, but the underhanded way that organisations like Rainbow Youth and Inside Out are promoting themselves, and I've got all the books. I mean, people can ask to look at them. They have books on how to recruit, basically. I call it recruit, but they go out and try and find people, and they bring them in with pretty colours and food and saying you're going to be welcome here, and there's a lot of chatter about how those sorts of groups are actually targeting children who might have who might be on the spectrum, or who might be socially awkward, or might be really quiet and don't have many friends. Come, and so it's not actually what they're trying to sell it as, which we're here to try and help this poor marginalised minority. No, they're going out to try and find people.
They're sort of profiling people that have got a personality that's awkward, socially awkward,
that's more
introverted, susceptible,
yeah.
Easy to train your thinking.
Might not have both parents or good parents on board, might be just more vulnerable to...
Ooh, that stings,
yeah.
That really stings. Oh, you've only got mums, just no dad, eh?
Yeah, well, I'll be your dad.
Yeah.
I'll be your trusted. So they become in and they want to be the trusted thing. So that's why I highlighted that one, because... it's maybe more so you could go in and go, well, based on the enrolment form, can you please provide me with an entire list of all of the groups, because they're not, I do know that some of them have these groups and the parents had no idea that those groups were going on. So so now can we go to the next tab? So that's
certainly
the end of this same enrolment form. And actually we'll just scroll through a bit of what I've highlighted there. So this is just around the Privacy Act.
Okay.
So it says information will be available to staff or those appointed responsible for, and then the last bullet point there is supporting the welfare of the students, which of course sounds great, but that would be the nurse who's contracted to the health department, and then it says the school is required to provide some personal information to other agencies, and this is an interesting enrolment form because it actually lists the New Zealand Children and Young Persons Service, so that's now Oranga Tamariki, the New Zealand Law Society, which is a strange one, I thought, but so you want to maybe ask, and under what conditions would you pass my child's details onto the New Zealand Law Society? But the one that I want to point out here is because they don't say anything about the health department there, but they say Crown Health Enterprise. So I looked up, and we'll come back to this, but can you just flick to the next tab just to show what the Crown Health entity is?
Certainly.
So the Crown Health
they're referring to this entity.
They're referring to the Ministry of Health. So that's where we talk about there's a Ministry of Health, Te Whatu Order, and then in your local area you'll have a local nurses group, which they had the name of it on that previous letter. It can be Pinnacle Healthcare and stuff like that. So it comes under a bunch of names, but the way that enrolment form is done is it just says Crown Health Entities, which is all or any of them.
And you've signed off on it.
And you signed off on it, yeah. So can we just go back to that enrolment form?
Okay.
So this, what we're just showing you is the doorway from when you're signing an enrolment form for school. So then it says under that in point 3, the school may provide the public health nurse with enrolment and contact information. So that's how the HEEADSSS assessment information got to the parent at the beginning of the year before her child had actually started at high school. Interesting, it also says that they can provide the information to the PTA, which is interesting. And then it says it includes confidential references, which is interesting as well. And then this number 7 is important to note, which is information about students may be provided to researchers conducting academic research or research related to welfare and well-being of students. So if you've signed your enrolment form, you're signing all of that.
Just with one signature, you've signed off on all of this.
With one stroke of the pen.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know, I know one parent who never signed anything when they put their kid in school years ago. They just paid their fees and said, I'm not signing anything, you're not doing anything. And they accepted it because they paid the fees. But I wouldn't know many
if
parents.
I recall, that was a private school that was quite up there with expensive fees. And they were like, okay, just give us the 20,000, whatever it was.
Yep.
For the semester.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
So yeah, hopefully that's really helpful for people to actually get the courage to just go looking at your enrolment forms. Some enrolment forms you can get, like I just was able to get all this stuff, it's available online. Some of the schools I was looking at, you put all your contact details in first and then you press next, so you can't actually see what's in the enrolment form until you've started submitting your data. So I couldn't go and have a look at that because obviously I'm not trying to enroll a child. So I just want to talk a little bit about what is social emotional learning. I want to just read out a little bit of an excerpt from our analysis on what social emotional learning is, because people might not be aware of that term, but it's related to data mining, which is collecting information about your children. So there's an organisation in America called Courage is a Habit, and they've got great resources, and we can use them and adapt them for New Zealand context. So what they say, Courage is a Habit USA says that social emotional learning, SEL, programs claim to teach children self and social awareness, responsible decision making and self-management. Sounds great. SEL allows schools to use screening surveys to collect mental health data on students and is then interpreted through an equity lens and is stored and used to create psychological profiles for each student. Surveys often use leading questions to gain access to students' attitude, beliefs and values on subjective matters that are often divisive. So that sounds a little bit like the HEEADSSS assessment, doesn't it? And they say, i.e. Black Lives Matter. So this is this whole creating division, you know, grouping people, labelling people. The survey aims to create social change by creating a social justice culture in schools, which is, as claimed by Courage as a Habit, can lead to lower academic achievement. With schools focusing more on issues of social justice rather than academic subjects, there could be some merit to this claim. So Courage as a Habit says that social emotional learning is a way of data mining your child and indoctrinating them into an ideological way of thinking as opposed to critical thinking. They urge parents to be alert to the pushing of such screening surveys and to exercise their right to opt the child out.
Well, you weren't wrong about creating victims.
Well, it seems to be what's out there.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So that's from an organisation in America. So we're not just battling this on our own. It's a big thing that's going on.
If I hadn't paid attention to Dr. Jordan Peterson, I wouldn't have realised how viewing things through an equity lens could be so bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's what, when we see it in our society everywhere, whether it's about gender, whether it's about racial stuff, whether it's about politics.
Yeah.
You know, it's not feeling great out there at the moment when we're using these formats. It's really not tackling and solving the so-called mental health crisis that there is.
True.
So, to me, it comes back to having these brave conversations, and us parents and people who are willing to speak up about what they're seeing in their industries that are so wrong, to have their voices heard. And as we know, the mainstream media won't hear their voices. They go to their go-to so-called experts.
Yeah.
And those of us who are out there in society, we're left out in the cold, which is one of the reasons why Let Kids Be Kids does what it does, because we have to bring the voice back to the people.
Well, speaking of what Let Kids Be Kids do, I think it might be appropriate to just flick over to your website for a second, and as we wrap this up, remind people who are concerned about this topic that there are some things you can do to help. You can contribute on our forums. You can, well, I should say your forums, and you can contribute on comments at YouTube or reaching out to you directly. But perhaps because you're a grassroots organisation, you might want to contribute some assistance. And here's the website, Let Kids Be Kids. And you wanted me to bring up your Substack, didn't you?
Yeah, please show the Substack.
Because this is a great resource for people to get into.
Yeah.
That's you on a recent interview with Reality Check Radio. There's a whole bunch of articles linked here which will help anyone who's learning about this come to terms with some of the interesting topics. Anything there did you want to shout out?
No, it's just Substack is the next level of like what would used to have been a blog post, but like lots of organisations like ours are on there, and it's just a really great platform. People can comment and reply, you can restack it, and you can just share it out really well.
I was getting my head around what Substack is because I wasn't so tech savvy on that, but I note that there it is in your as a tab within your website. So when you click on that, it takes you through to what was once the blog style of sharing information, but it's very, very newsworthy. Yeah,
it's the homepage of basically our news of Let Kids Be Kids. But if you subscribe, then you get each one into your inbox. So it comes into your inbox as an email, but it's also there on the website. So if you just scroll down, so we've got our last video there.
Yeah.
And then underneath that, we've got just featured like our last 4 posts. So,
right.
Yeah, we've got lots of information there to help people.
I want to say there's some really cool merch that people can get. You only get a small cut of that. That's right. Yeah. Look at that shirt.
Yeah,
that's a really cool one.
Pretty cool.
But you can be, as you've put, a walking billboard, and a few dollars of each hoodie, shirt, T-shirt sold goes to Let Kids Be Kids, which is really nice. And I'll just say this because I know you probably won't, but you can buy you a coffee, which is the little icon down there, the yellow one, which goes across to open this tab, which is where you can support Let Kids Be Kids. Buying a coffee is just a few dollars. There's another option there. I noticed that the bronze supporter is $10 a month. That's great. Great way to start off if you want to be involved and have that direct connection and support a worthy cause. There's also higher level ones, $25, $50, a diamond one if you want to give a one-off cohort. That's really nice. It's really nice, Penny. I think that's really great that that's there, because an organisation like yours, the work you do is it's difficult. There's research, you've done analysis, you've got reports, you've reached out to professionals who are really helping parents around the country, and I think outside of New Zealand too, because this is an international issue, but this is our specific context. So if you can give Let Kids some support, please do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so just in closing, and thank you for that, because it's hard to ask.
Yeah, I know it is.
And we
That's
obviously
why I
don't
said
get
it.
any government funding. They probably don't like us doing what we're doing. So we're pushing against a big beast here. And really the best thing that people can do is share our content with new people. Share it with your mum, share it with your friend who's a teacher, share it with your cousin.
Absolutely.
Get it out there. It's not offensive stuff. We're just trying to educate and inform. And just what I'll say is this HEEADSSS assessment situation, we created a report. The report's available on our website, on our resources page, and you can download it. And we do ask for at least a $5 donation, so you'll get a donation option there.
Pretty reasonable.
Just to thank us for the work. And that's there. So we would really love for people to look a bit deeper at this. There's a lot more information in there than we've talked about in any of the interviews. That's where I would go if you're concerned about it. But please reach out, send a message, drop a message on your favourite social media for us, or email us, and you can get to us on our website, letkidsbekids.nz, because this conversation is important and others like it. We're here. We want to create these regional networks so that parents are supported by parents. Yeah. It's really important.
All right. Well, in closing, on whatever forum or platform you're watching this on, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.